When the racetrack was still the ultimate proving ground for speed, Suzuki didn't just build a fast motorcycle, they created a true racing beast, then boldly unleashed it onto public roads, with headlights, mirrors, and a license plate. The RG500 Gamma wasn't a tame replica of a Grand Prix racer. It was the race bike, only barely civilized enough to sneak past the law. A machine born from smoke, speed, and blood on the track, but howling through city streets like it dared the world to stop it. But because it was too wild, too powerful, and too close to its racing DNA, the RG500 Gamma was quietly banned in multiple countries and eventually faded from the market. That's why you've probably never seen one in person. Let's uncover the mysterious story of the Suzuki RG500 Gamma, the bike the world rejected because it was too brilliant. To understand why the RG500 Gamma was so special, we have to go back to the 1970s and 1980s, an era when Grand Prix racing wasn't just a sport, but a fight for survival. During this time, the two-stroke engine began to dominate. It was lighter, simpler, and when tuned correctly, could produce jaw-dropping power for its size. It was an age where every race was a gamble with speed and with life. Suzuki, not yet as dominant as Honda or Yamaha, set out to build a weapon of their own. The result was the RG500, a race machine powered by a unique square-4 engine, lightweight, explosive, and brutally fast. With British legend Barry Sheene in the saddle, the RG500 made the world take notice. Back-to-back championship wins in 1976 and 1977 weren't just trophies, they were Suzuki's ticket to global respect and recognition. But what shocked the world wasn't just what Suzuki achieved, it was how they did it. Beneath the blazing laps lay an engine with a design unlike anything before. The two-stroke square-4, the beating heart of the RG500. Imagine two pairs of parallel twin cylinders, each acting like its own mini-engine, joined together by a shared gear system. Each pair had its own crankshaft spinning in opposite directions, delivering perfect dynamic balance and razor-sharp throttle response. The result? A compact, lightweight, 497 cubic centimeter engine producing over 123 horsepower, an unthinkable number for the time. Torque reached nearly 52 pound-feet, launching the bike out of corners like a rocket. The square-4 wasn't just powerful, it had a mechanically violent sound, with a firing order unlike anything else. When Barry Sheene twisted the throttle, the RG500 didn't just pull ahead, it felt like it was shredding the pavement. And most importantly, this engine wasn't pieced together from other bikes. It was built specifically for the RG500 with one purpose: to win in Grand Prix. And they did it. But after those glorious victories, Suzuki could have easily stopped, harvested the fame, and sold a few street bikes with a touch of racing flavor. That's what the big players did. Safe, efficient, profitable. But Suzuki was different. They weren't afraid to break the mold. Inside the company, a bold and outrageous idea began to take shape. If we can build a championship-winning race machine, why shouldn't regular riders get a taste of it too, on public roads? And so the RG500 Gamma project was born, not as a soft, watered-down replica of the RG500, but as a tamed race bike that never forgot its wild spirit. What set it apart wasn't just the technology, it was the attitude. Suzuki didn't try to hide the Gamma's Grand Prix bloodline, they flaunted it. The Gamma didn't disguise itself. It roared like a race bike, handled like a race bike, and reacted like a race bike. The market wasn't ready for this. Most street bikes were designed to be smooth, balanced, and mass-friendly. And that untamed spirit, the very thing that made the RG500 Gamma unlike anything else on the street, came from its two-stroke heart. A compact, simple engine, hiding a storm, ready to explode at any moment. Unlike four-stroke engines, praised for their smoothness and durability, two-strokes were all about pure detonation. Lighter, less complex, and when tuned properly, capable of producing ridiculous power from surprisingly small displacements. Their sky-high power-to-weight ratio made two-stroke bikes feel like fireworks with wheels, and the RG500 Gamma was the biggest blast of them all. Below 6,000 RPM, the Gamma behaved. But once the needle crossed that line, the bike turned feral. The engine screamed, torque surged, and the front wheel clawed skyward. The rider wasn't in control. They were hanging on for survival. This wasn't a bike for relaxing. It was a shot of raw adrenaline, forcing you to stay sharp, focused, and ready to fight every time you cracked the throttle. And when the RG500 hit the streets in 1985, you might think the street version would be softened to suit the market, but it wasn't. Suzuki retained nearly all the technical brilliance of the race bike and wrapped it in a chassis with a license plate. The heart of the Gamma was a 497 cubic centimeter two-stroke square four engine, identical in layout to the RG500 from the track, only slightly refined for real-world conditions. Power was reduced to about 95 horsepower, and torque stayed near 45 pound-feet, still enough to make any sport bike of the era nervous. What made the Gamma truly special wasn't the specs, it was the boldness of its mechanical design. The engine featured two separate crankshafts spinning in opposite directions, synchronized by gears, creating perfect balance and lightning-fast throttle response. It used rotary disc valves to precisely control intake timing and volume, delivering immediate response the moment you twisted the throttle. Each cylinder had its own exhaust pipe, maximizing flow and producing that crisp, aggressive two-stroke sound. An ultra-lightweight aluminum frame kept the bike's dry weight to just around 340 pounds. The suspension and braking system were race-inspired, offering razor-sharp handling, but also making the bike unforgiving if the rider let their guard down. The RG500 Gamma was not for beginners. It was a surgical blade built for speed. It demanded precision, focus, and deep respect from the person in the saddle. But if you had the nerve and the skill, the reward was an experience so pure, so raw, that few motorcycles, before or since, have ever come close. And at the time the RG500 Gamma was released, Suzuki wasn't the only brand trying to bring race tech to the streets. Yamaha had the RD500LC, and Honda introduced the NS400R, both promoted as Grand Prix-inspired machines, both equipped with two-stroke V4 engines and wrapped in sporty bodywork. But when placed next to the RG500 Gamma, they looked noticeably tame. Yamaha's RD500LC had good low-end torque and smoother manners, but lacked the explosive punch and wild edge. Honda's NS400R was light, agile, and easier to handle, but it didn't deliver the same raw, visceral thrill as the Gamma. In other words, they were effective sport bikes, while the RG500 Gamma was a wild beast disguised as street-legal machinery. Motorcycle magazines at the time almost unanimously called the Gamma the closest thing to a Grand Prix bike you could buy from a dealership. And they weren't exaggerating. Every twist of the throttle, every corner entry, every hard brake delivered a response that felt immediate, alive, and demanded your full attention. In a world where most manufacturers were trying to soften the speed experience to please everyday riders, Suzuki went the other way. They built a motorcycle, not for the masses, but one that reached the absolute peak of what true enthusiasts dreamed of. Though the RG500 Gamma was praised as a technical marvel, it came with flaws that couldn't be ignored. The very things that made it special, its unique engine layout, brutal power delivery, and wild personality, were also a double-edged sword. The most noticeable issue was its highly aggressive power band. Below 6,000 RPM, the bike felt sluggish, almost lifeless. But once it crossed that threshold, the torque hit like an explosion. For inexperienced riders, that sudden surge could mean losing control in a heartbeat. The synchronized dual crankshaft setup of the Square 4 engine, while clever, added immense mechanical complexity. Under sustained high-rev use, crankshafts and pistons were prone to wear and even catastrophic failure if not meticulously maintained. The cooling systems struggled in stop-and-go traffic or hot urban conditions, often leading to overheating or mid-ride shutdowns. The clutch wore quickly. Electrical gremlins were common. The gearbox developed a notchy feel over time. All of it made the Gamma a high-maintenance machine. To keep it happy, you had to know it, understand it, and be willing to live with it like a moody friend. On top of that, sourcing replacement parts was a real challenge, as few modern mechanics are truly familiar with the bike today. And by the late 1980s, emissions and noise regulations across Europe and North America began to tighten. Two-stroke engines, which relied on burning both fuel and oil, were suddenly labeled as public enemy #1 by lawmakers. The very sound that had thrilled motorcycle fans, the high-pitched scream, became a prime target for regulatory crackdown. But it didn't stop there. Insurance companies began to eye this machine with growing suspicion. With a reputation for being difficult to handle, a high accident rate, and demanding rider skill, it was placed in the extreme risk category. Premiums soared. Many dealers stopped offering it altogether, fearing legal liability. Even if you could find one for sale, getting it registered and street legal became a steep challenge. New standards for noise, emissions, and import procedures led to many examples being rejected outright during inspection. In the end, it wasn't failure that forced this machine off the streets. It was the world around it that changed. But while the world turned its back on it, motorcycle lovers never forgot. In fact, being killed off too soon only cemented its status as a living legend, a treasure growing ever rarer and more sought after around the globe. Today, the RG500 Gamma isn't just a vintage sport bike. It's a symbol of uncompromising engineering, a relic of an era when the line between racetrack and public roads nearly disappeared. Every surviving Gamma holds a piece of that memory, the dream of unfiltered speed, untouched by regulations, markets, or fear. Its collectability has soared. A clean, unmodified example can fetch upwards of $40,000 to $50,000, depending on condition, provenance, and timing. Ultra-rare models in the US or Canada, where imports were restricted, often command even higher prices. But for true enthusiasts, price is just one factor. What they're chasing is a feeling. The thrill of a time when motorcycles didn't ask permission to be wild. A time when the rider wasn't shielded by layers of electronics, but directly connected to a raw, unchained machine. The RG500 Gamma was never meant for the masses. It was built for those who embrace risk, push the limits, and crave the purest riding experience possible. No traction control, no ABS, no fancy digital displays, just you, the machine, and the road ahead. And somehow, that very lack is what makes it one of the most inspiring motorcycles ever created. In today's world of safety, smoothness, and precision, the Gamma stands as a reminder that sometimes the craziest thing is the only thing worth chasing. If you've ever ridden or heard the scream of this legendary two-stroke beast, share your memories in the comments. And if this is your first time learning about the RG500 Gamma, would you dare to ride a street-legal monster? Drop your thoughts below, hit subscribe to join us on more thrilling journeys, and smash that like button if you believe this story deserves to be remembered.